Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Robin Smith, the founder of the Healthy Relationships Sisterhood Facebook group, and happy to be back with you tonight. This is our usual time, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for my live training, and these are totally free and open to all. And what we're talking about tonight is how trauma affects your communication, and specifically developmental trauma, although I will bring up a little bit about shock trauma. So there's just different types of trauma. So we'll be looking at that and the various ways your communication can be affected, especially in your closest relationships, and then what to do about it. So here we go, launching in. I'm bringing up my notes because I have a little list for you, various areas to cover as we explore this, how trauma affects your relationships or your communication. So you may have experienced for yourself when you get very reactive, you get triggered. And this is such a common response that I've spoken to before. People, either you notice yourself or your partner is, someone said to me today, very sensitive. This person's very sensitive. I have to be careful. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells around them or else they just blow up. That is often a trauma response, and it's directly related to your nervous system. So when you've had a lot of early trauma, and especially types of trauma that were like abuse, where you felt like you had to be on guard, where you felt like you were not safe in your environment, then you would have developed a nervous system that to protect you would be on guard, would be highly activated and alert. And so it doesn't take much to trip that system, right? Because it's like in protection mode a lot. It's in also, it could be in fight mode, like as in fight flight. So it's a sympathetic arousal, a state in the nervous system, and it's easy to get triggered when you're in that type of state. And so you might often be looking for, like, where's the out, where's my safety mechanism, is it safe here? You're checking the environment because you've learned through your early life that it wasn't safe, and so you needed to do that to protect yourself. So you can imagine, if that's you or if someone you know, that it's hard to relax if that's your constant state of being. So we're talking about a nervous system on high alert. If you're just getting here, welcome. And if you are just arriving, I see a few people coming on. Please say hello and let us know where you are listening in from tonight. And if you're watching the replay, same thing. I'd love to know where you're listening from. And let me know as we go along if you have any questions along the way. I am so happy to respond to your questions. So other reasons you may have a nervous system on high alert if you weren't in an environment like chronically that felt unsafe, it could have been that you did have some sort of what we call a shock trauma, a one-time event, that like a car accident, and that can affect how your nervous system is wired. It's like it kind of trips the system and you get agitated, and you're more easily agitated, more easily anxious and strung out, and so it really is helpful if you've had a situation like that, a shock event where you were harmed, or where you just feel not the same after, that you get some help, that you get some support from someone trained to work with shock trauma, so they can help you to downregulate your nervous system from that kind of high alert sympathetic arousal state. So another response you may have based on early trauma or a shock trauma could be sort of the flip side of the highly reactive or triggered situation, is where you might shut down. You might literally like kind of close off your awareness, kind of zone out, dissociate. And that's similar but different. It can actually seem like the person is depressed energetically, but internally they could actually have a very similar, like highly reactive system. They could be on overdrive on that sympathetic arousal, but it doesn't show so much on the outside. But the point is, for that person, when they are confronted, when there's conflict, their go-to may be the shutdown response because they're already overwhelmed with so much energy flooding the system. So it's easier for them to just deal with that by shutting down and kind of, blacking out in a way, not literally, but metaphorically going offline. So these are two ways that trauma can affect how you communicate, right? Because you can't have conscious, easeful, connecting type of communication if you're highly reactive or shutting down and disconnecting. Let's look at some more. Another version of kind of a shutting down is when someone doesn't have good eye contact. We've all probably met people who avert their eyes a lot, who don't seem to be able to maintain eye contact, or who, maybe that's you, you feel very uncomfortable making eye contact. And so please be gentle with yourself if you know that's how you show up sometimes or often. That can also be based on very early trauma, actually. There's a type of trauma that happens, it can even be as early as in the womb. And up to the first 6 months of life, we call the connection survival style in the work that I do. And that person has had a lack of connection to the mother, especially in the womb, in the gestation time, and in the important phase of early bonding. And so when you haven't had that important attachment, secure attachment time, not being able to make eye contact is one response. Because you may feel like, and there's variations of this, like there are for everybody and across the board with all types of trauma and just based on the individual. But if you have a sense like you weren't wanted, or you don't matter, your presence is ignored, or you feel neglected, then that kind of lack of ability to really connect can happen. You feel like you're not really here, sort of like feeling invisible. And it can also be that there's this intensity that happens like an overwhelm inside your system when you try to make eye contact, because your nervous system did not get wired securely. You didn't get the kind of support that you needed to grow your nervous system in a healthy way. And so making connection can feel overwhelming. So that's where the eye contact can be a limiting factor. And of course, it's hard to make a really good connection with someone who cannot make solid eye contact. So just wanting to name that here. Another way that we might show up when we have had trauma and how that may affect communication is we might be afraid to speak the truth. We might be afraid to share authentically. So if you had the type of trauma where you were punished for being expressive, as you know, children can be very expressive, can be very uninhibited, full out expression, and sometimes they get punished for that, or they get made fun of, or they get harmed for that. So then they would learn that it's not safe to express myself. And so then it feels safer to like I was saying before, shut down, but also to withhold the truth. Because if the truth got you in trouble, then of course you make that connection. It's not safe to tell the truth. It's not safe to be myself, to share what I'm thinking, to share how I'm feeling. So you learn to hide that. And you may even, on the flip side, learn to try hard to share what you think people want to hear. So that might even turn more into like the pleaser type persona, where you're trying to read people and see is what's the right thing to say, what can I say that I'll be liked. So you can imagine how that would affect communication, because if you're trying really hard to like figure out what to say and say the right thing, or if you know you're holding back for fear of rejection or some type of ridicule or judgment, then it's pretty hard to make an authentic connection. Hope that makes sense. And I'm seeing some comments from Nalini, welcome. And safety, yeah, safe is a really big word, and it's super important for our nervous systems, for our ability to connect and to relax and have healthy relationships. And if we don't know how to have that because we weren't brought up in a safe environment, it's going to take some practice and some work to learn to develop, especially an inner sense of safety. So you're welcome and thank you for being here. And let me know if you have any questions. So let's move on to another one, which is a way you might show up in communication could be you blame and criticize a lot. And that could be because you learned to do that. That's what I learned in my early environment. There was a lot of blaming going on and criticizing, and of course in our culture, criticism is very normal and common. And a lot of us do that, and we don't think twice about it because we're steeped in that as little ones, and we see it on TV and we see it in the news and in politics, and it's just everywhere. So it seems normal, and yet as a child to get blamed and criticized is traumatic because you're growing your self-esteem, you're growing your sense of self, and what children need the most is approval and to know that they matter, to know that they're doing good, and that's what helps them feel good about themselves. And so when we don't get that, when we get more criticism than we do praise and appreciation, we tend to feel ashamed. We grow up feeling shameful about who we are. We grow up feeling bad about ourselves, like we're not good enough, like there's something wrong with us. And then it's hard to be, again, authentic in communication. And we may, from that place of not feeling good enough, be the one who blames and criticizes. Because to be the blamer and the criticizer actually can help you feel a sense of empowerment. Think about it. When you get to go, it's your fault, or who did that? You get energy from that. You get like an upliftment, even though it may only be momentarily. So you get to feel a little bit better about yourself when you're right, when you're righteous, when you have the answers, when you know things. And so that's another one I wanted to touch on, is blaming and criticizing, but also that commitment to winning the battle, the argument, to being right. Like raise a hand or put a yes in the comment if you love to be right. I don't know too many people who don't love to be right. And again, that's very normal in our culture to strive for that, to strive to know the answers and to excel and succeed and all that stuff and to be right. But the problem with being so committed to being right is that you may not be able to be humble, and you may also be really kind of fixed and attached to making others wrong so you can feel right and feel righteous. And then you get an adrenaline hit, you get to feel good about yourself. But again, it's not a great way to make a connection because when someone's trying hard to be right and making another person wrong, well, how does that feel if you're that person who's being made wrong? So when you're in that position of criticizing, blaming, or trying to be right or win the argument, you are basically creating more distance than you are connection. And so it really affects communication and what we want from communication, right? We communicate to be understood. We communicate to be heard, to be seen. And so all those ways that those habitual patterns of blaming, criticizing, and trying to be right are usually going to get you the opposite. They're going to get you being maybe judged. They're going to get you more distance. And maybe not being really heard, because instead of being heard, you're probably going to get a response of defensiveness or a response of someone else trying to be right and trying to up the ante or compete with you. So it doesn't really foster a closeness. I'm going to read some comments. Hello, Elisa. Starting to let go of being right or wrong. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Doesn't that feel good when you can just not care so much about being right? That's really helped me. You're welcome. I see it. Thank you so much. I was kind of obliterated by trauma, not a lot of being right, really. Yeah, I'm sorry, really sorry to hear that. Obliterated, that's a powerful word. Yeah, so sometimes we just need to do some healing around that. And I know you have done some work on that. And, you're such a lovely person. I imagine that you've come a long way from that feeling. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions on that note. So I'm going to keep going through my list here. And another one is not being, let's see, I sort of said that. So I wanted to add not being open to other perspectives. And I see that as kind of this other side of the coin of being really committed to being right. It's sort of like my way or the highway, right? This is how it is, and there's no other way. So again, it kind of shuts people out when we do that. You're welcome for caring. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on, another one is I was just talking with someone today who was talking about someone kind of assuming that she would want to jump into this like kind of an activist role. And then my friend who was sharing this with me was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't feel comfortable with that. And so instead of saying that piece of truth to her friend about how she felt about this kind of, I'm going to need you to show up in this way, like with your, signs and your protests and stuff, she just didn't respond to it directly. And she just said, I support you, and I'm thinking about that now as, it's kind of an indirect response. It's not really directly responding to the issue. And the truth for my friend was that she was afraid to. She had fear come up about hurting her friend's feelings. And so that's why she didn't want to, as I love to say, go direct. So she kind of went sideways around the issue, didn't say anything about it. And so that's, affects clear communication. There is no clear communication there when you kind of sidestep the issue. So put a yes in the comment if that's familiar for you. If you get a lot of fear up for like directly responding to something that feels edgy to you. The fear for her in this case was of hurting her friend's feelings, her friend not feeling her support. But also often for people, it can be a fear of rejection again. It can be a fear of not being liked for doing what people want you to do, right? If you really speak, again, your truth, speak what's on your mind, speak how you feel. And it's very normal and common to have that fear of people not liking you and shunning you, abandoning you. But it doesn't actually, but then there's this kind of murkiness in the communication. Then you don't have like an understanding between you when you don't directly address like what was said. So I was supporting her in considering expressing the whole truth for herself, which was, I don't know that I want to do that right now. I don't yet have an answer. I want to think about it. That was her truth in the moment. She was uncomfortable, but she was considering, the two sides of it. But she realized after we talked that she could actually say that, whereas before she didn't know how to say anything, and she just kind of froze, which is another fear response, and and sidestepped the issue. So I wanted to bring that here, that we can go indirect or we can go direct. We can be passive or we can be assertive. And I take issue sometimes with the word assertive because it has these connotations of like aggressive, but it's not aggressive to be assertive. It's just to be direct. It's just to be straightforward. So you can substitute a different word if assertive doesn't work for you either. But that can get in the way, of course, when our fear gets in the way of communication, then we don't have clear communication sometimes. We don't have an understanding. We don't have a connection. So generally, those are the things we're seeking, again, with communication: understanding, to be seen and heard, to have a connection. And when we do these various, habitual, patterns, that can get in the way of that. Just checking on the comments. I'm hearing you. I'm seeing you. Yes. So the last one I had, which I've pretty much touched on in other ways, is not sharing openly. So that was kind of just now addressed. But sometimes it's not in a response to somebody. It's simply like it was for me back in the day. I just wouldn't really share what was going on in my life so much, my struggles, my pains, my frustrations, for similar reasons that I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of being judged. And um, I forgot to speak about the trauma around that, this in the last example of someone like pressuring you to show up in a certain way and then you go indirect. So the trauma there can be that you were pressured a lot early in life. Sometimes our caregivers are very pressuring. They're very like pushing us to be a certain way. They're wanting us to be again, successful or cute, or to dress the right way or say the right thing, and they don't really know how to honor our authentic expression. And so if and what a child does with that is they decide having the attachment and the connection to the caregiver is more important than the authenticity, because you need your caregiver for survival. So a child will shut down their authentic self in order to maintain connection to the attachment figure, whatever caregiver there was. So this is a type of what we call developmental trauma, when you aren't given the kind of support, acknowledgement, connection that you needed. You end up having to kind of shape yourself around what is given and shut down a part of your authenticity. And the problem with that is that that can continue later in life, because there's this kind of growth, laid down understanding that in order to be loved and liked, I have to be like so and so. I have to be nice. I have to be good. I have to be cute, whatever it is, successful. So we learn to shape ourselves to be liked, but then often that's when we get into the sort of the pitfall of like saying yes when we really want to say no, being a pleaser. And that's that inauthentic space again, which ends up causing us a lot of resentment, because we're not getting liked for who we naturally are. We're getting liked for who we're trying really hard to be. So that would cause this fear of rejection quite a bit later in life, and maybe with the strategy of being more passive or indirect, or maybe with the strategy like I was sharing for myself of not sharing very openly, kind of holding my cards tight, not really wanting to be known because I was too afraid I wouldn't be liked. So there's so many reasons for something like that, and I'm just giving one example. There's other ways that could come about, other types of trauma. I'm seeing another comment, not just caregivers, but in my day, the cultural generally. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Absolutely, right? You had to be neat, you had to be, put together, and that still goes on, of course. So there's a lot of cultural pressure, and different cultures have different kind of pressures to be certain ways. So it takes a lot of inner strength to go against that, right? To really find your own voice, to find your truth, to stand up against the whatever pressures are coming towards you. And usually in order to do that, we need support. We need an inner feeling of support, and like we matter, and what we have and how we feel is important. I wanted to say something else about the person who may be really committed to being right and feeling powerful from that, is that there's a kind of trauma that when you've had caregivers who were very, I'm going to look up the word. I wrote it down earlier and I'm spacing on it. Let me see if I can find it. I can't find it. Okay. Overbearing. That's the word I was thinking of. When you have overbearing caregivers, and again, they could be pressuring, but they could also be like do a lot of withholding their love for you. Like they don't really express any love, and what they express more is a lot of criticism. What they express is you need to be like me, and I only give you attention when you're doing what I tell you to do, and otherwise I withdraw my attention from you. I only give you attention when you succeed in the way I think you should succeed. These are some examples of what might be called narcissistic caregivers. There's a whole spectrum of narcissism, and I'm not going to go into that right now. But if you really felt like you didn't have a voice, like who you were wasn't important to your parents, they didn't really tune into your individuality. They wanted you just to circulate around them and be like, they wanted to kind of craft you into their own little mini me, right? Make you a certain way, and you didn't have a voice, you didn't have much power, you didn't have a say in your choices, you were disempowered, then feeling powerful would be really important to you later in life. So that might be, again, a type of trauma that can end up later either being narcissistic yourself, or being very power hungry, being very righteous, trying to make others look bad and small so you can feel powerful and big. So that's just one more example of a type of developmental trauma. I know I'm going through this quickly. We're going to end in a minute. I'm seeing another comment from Nalini. I was so resentful of that since I was a good athlete, student, musician. Yeah, all not appealing or sexy. I'm really sorry that you had that experience, because everyone deserves to be praised for their talents and to be praised for just being you, to be really seen and held up and supported for being your authentic self, no matter how, talented or much you could excel in any one activity. So I'm really sorry that you didn't get enough of that, or any. So I'm going to wrap up, but I wanted to say that if you got here late, this replay will be available. Please go ahead and listen back. And I am offering a few free consultations in what I call the Relationship Breakthrough Session. And this is an opportunity to sit down with me and to look at, where you feel stuck in your relationships, either with yourself internally or with someone else, where you might like support, where you might like some guidance in getting to where you want to be in life. That's what I'm up to in these sessions, is giving you some clarity. People get a lot out of these sessions, some takeaways. Sometimes they make big life changes from the session. It's just about a half hour. But we can also look at, how I could support you further if you're interested in that. So there's a link. I'm going to put that in the comment right now. Thank you so much, those of you who have been here live. Thank you if you're watching the recording. I will see you soon, and thanks for being here. Bye for now.